Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, bright and happy fall morning to y'all, beginning of the autumn season, and a chance for a day-long retreat. So, like always, at the very least, you've taken the precepts. If your meditation is just a complete wash and all sorts of stuff comes up, you took the precepts and you have a chance to work at those. So you get some value out of the day. But if you're able to commit to the schedule and you're just working on the meditations that you've been developing over time, well, that's even better. And hopefully the schedule helps support that. And then if you want to cherry on top, we get to do a little study and we get to look at a little aspect of the Dhamma to help inform our practice. And you might not find it immediately relevant today, but maybe some of that is information that helps inform you and gets the gears turning on how to deal with, you know, a real existing part of our practice, which is working with the hindrances. So when we sit down to meditate, we set the intention, I'm going to be mindful, I'm going to pay attention to the breath, I'm going to stay in the present moment, and then we do something else. And why? Well, if often what we have to do is we have to look and we have to slow things down in our mind until we can catch that moment where we right before we go off and we get distracted, we get interested in something, or we get annoyed by something, or we just get bored with something. What was the moment right before that? It will almost feel like we are hitting a wall. And this is why the hindrances are called hindrances. The word nivarana means obstacle. We hit a mental wall, something that we weren't willing or able or interested in facing. And so we choose an escape route. We choose the wrong kind of escape route from that feeling, which is to ignore it, to run away from it, to distract ourselves from it. Doesn't deal with the problem and makes it worse. Because if we choose to ignore the problem, what do we do but we cultivate ignorance? And ignorance is a problem. Yeah, it is the root of our problems. So even if we don't think we're experiencing the hindrances right now, we are in this very moment experiencing the byproduct of the hindrances. Because in the past, for innumerable mind moments, we have cultivated these 5 hindrances and we have let them direct our mind away from mindfulness and presentness of mind and loving kindness and all these wholesome mind states. We have a reservoir of ignorance and delusion and all sorts of personality quirks that are just there. It's a big mass of suffering that we carry with us. So first thing we do is we separate out. Today, mostly we're going to be talking about the hindrance rather than talking about the byproduct of the hindrance, which is hard to distinguish because there isn't a clear separation made in the suttas between the two. But I think it's a useful distinction to make. So one example, say we'll bring up, this is the Samyutta Nikaya 1.16. And so simple, quick little sutta: sleepiness, sloth, yawning, discontent, and grogginess after eating. Because of this, the noble path doesn't shine for creatures here. So that's, we see a lot of examples like this of the mention, sloth and torpor, the mention of drowsiness, laziness, sleepiness, and it being posed as an obstacle to our path and practice. Yeah? Here's another example in the Sutta Nipata 4.15, where we're encouraged, prevail over sleepiness, sloth, and drowsiness. Don't abide in negligence. A person intent on quenching will not stand for arrogance. Yeah, all of these different mind states used to designate, you know, the byproducts. What is it like to have a low energy state, to be slowed down, to be impaired, to be stifled, to be stagnant? Yeah. I want to make this distinction because there can be an idea that, you know, we can kind of we can check our pulse, yeah, and we can say, oh, yeah, no, I don't have a problem with this. Yeah, no, I'm a happy person. I'm a lively person. I drink plenty of coffee. I get up. I do my yoga. I don't deal with sloth and torpor. And I think that's missing an opportunity to work with this, because even if you're one of these bright, joyful, you know, let's say greed type kind of people who are always looking to the next beautiful thing, once we start to point out what sloth and torpor as a hindrance is like, you might see that you do experience that a lot. It's just that rather than having a reservoir of laziness, low energy, sleepiness that starts to dominate and take over your mind, you immediately run away from it. You're like, oh, wow, this is boring. I'm going to do something else. So you immediately rush off into another activity. Or, you know, I really rather be doing something else right now. Zip. And that was sloth and torpor. That was the hindrance that motivated that action. You hit a wall and you went another way. Yeah. The only difference between that and somebody who's maybe got more of a sleepy delusion type character is they've got the reservoir of ignorance in that particular flavor. Yeah. And so when they hit that wall, they tend to just kind of sink and they're like, this is so boring. And they just zone out, they go to sleep. Yeah. The worst case scenario, if this really dominates your life, then you're a person who just you sleeps 10 hours a day and is always, you know, sitting on the couch watching TV and really, I mean, smokes marijuana and just sits around like staring at the sun as it traces its arc across the sky. I've met lots of people like this, but this is like a worst case scenario. Yeah, this is sloth and torpor absolutely dominates your mind. Yeah. And that's not even at the level of the hindrance anymore. That's you're just completely identified with the byproduct. I don't think I don't think we're really you wouldn't be here listening to this if you weren't trying to get out. And trying to get out is an energetic mind state. So first things like don't be scared. Yeah. We're going to look at this objectively. Uh, we're not going to be don't allow ourselves to like beat ourselves when we talk about the hindrances and be like, oh, you know, I'm just not energetic enough in my practice. Usually when somebody's thinking that, they're plenty energetic in their practice. Yeah, if you're taking the time to beat yourself up about how much practice you do, you've probably missed the fact that most people don't practice. Some people are even like violently opposed to the idea of practice. Yeah, they are what they are and they're satisfied with what they are, or don't realize how dissatisfied they are with what they are all of the time and make it somebody else's problem. Yeah, but we are trying to understand. Yeah. So this mind state that we're describing, sleepiness, sloth, torpor, drowsiness, negligence, yeah, what conditions it? What is that momentary mind state that if you neglect it, if you don't see it as it is, if you don't work through it, will build and build and build to being low energy, to being cut off, to being separated. Yeah. To we talked a bit earlier how all of the hindrances have this funny and unique kind of double word format. Yeah. Kama raga, sensuality and lust. Vyapada, ill will directed towards others. Sloth and torpor. So this is a construction of the word tina mida. Tina means stiffness, stagnation, and midda means drowsiness, torpor. Yeah? You put them together and you've got this sort of wide reaching kind of category of mental of thoughts that trigger a whole reservoir of mind states, basically dealing with low energy, the lack of agency, being cut off, being unable to do anything, and thereby kind of closing in. Things get dim, things get dark, things get tunnel visioned. Yeah, this is what we're dealing with. But the Buddha, he has a couple of similes. We can take a look at a couple of images he gives us. One here, what do we got? This is the Samyutta Nikaya 46.55, where the Buddha creates this is a beautiful sutta where the Buddha is talking specifically about the hindrances. He's approached by a Brahmin student who wants to know why sometimes he can't remember his chanting. Many of us have never even tried to memorize something. Yeah, but if you do, you find that even when you succeed in learning something, sometimes it's easy to remember and sometimes it's not. And he's trying to figure out why that is. He goes up to the Buddha, he's kind of all about figuring out how the mind works. And the Buddha says, it's the hindrances that are derailing you. Yeah, that's what you have to look to. And so here the Buddha uses this simile. Well, when one dwells with the mind obsessed by sloth and torpor, tinamita, overwhelmed by sloth and torpor, they don't understand as it really is the escape from arisen sloth and torpor. On that occasion, they neither know nor see as it really is their own good, or the good of others, or the good of society. Then even those hymns that have been recited over a long period will not occur to their mind, let alone those they haven't recited much. Suppose, Brahman, there is a bowl of water covered over with water plants and algae. If a man or woman with good sight were to examine his own facial reflection in it, he would neither know nor see it as it really is. So too, when one dwells with a mind obsessed by sloth and torpor. So this is one simile. The Buddha is using a bowl of water as this sort of stand-in for our mind. When our mind is clear, we can see through it, just like undisturbed, clean water. We can see through it. But if there's algae and plants and dust and debris on top of the water, the water is not clear, is covered over, well, then we couldn't see through it. Likewise, when our mind is affected by sloth and torpor, it is like we are obscured. Yeah, it is like we can't see our goal anymore. We can't see what it is we were trying to do. Something got in our way, we looked away, we got distracted, and suddenly, oh, what is it? Why am I here? What am I doing? What was I doing? What can be done? Oh, woe is me. There's nothing that can be done. I'm just going to sit here. I'm sitting here. I might as well go to sleep. Another, and I couldn't find a longer example of this, but in the another great sutta, the Samanyapala Sutta, Digha Nikaya number 2, we have a simile where the Buddha relates sloth and torpor to being locked in prison. Yeah. And this is another kind of image that we might use to kind of cultivate, like, what is this like? Well, define prison. Well, you're stuck in a small room. You can't see the outside. You can't choose when you get to eat. You can't choose when you get to sleep. You can't choose when you get to shower. You don't get any agency. And that is what leads to a kind of closing down. It's not that you don't have enough time. It's not that you don't have enough energy. You actually have a lot of those. You're not wasting your energy on anything. You have nothing but time. And yet the mind, when it's deprived of agency, tends to shut down. And this, in terms of a prisoner, they have all of the time and energy to get a PhD. And yet, how many prisoners, take that opportunity? How many of them just wait for it to be over? They just can't wait until they get out. They're counting the days. They're making those little scratch marks on the wall until they get out. Yeah. They see their prison as an obstruction, as a hindrance to doing what they want to do. And they've put their happiness into the future, right? The hindrance of sloth and torpor has stopped them from actively working towards whatever goal they had. They've shut down. So these are some examples similarly, and I think we all know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we get sloth and torpor, even if you're a bright, cheery person, and we do have those. You probably recognize sometimes when you get that feeling of a lack of agency. You get that feeling of a being hindered from doing what you want to do and losing touch with what it was you were wanting to do, and how this can lead to um, well, stopping, stopping moving in the direction of your goal and trying to do something else. Yeah. But all the more, and I think, we also have a fair representation of people like myself who, we're kind of lower energy. But it can be kind of fascinating to see how somebody who's more of a delusion character and tends to have what other people would perceive as lower energy can actually get a lot done. They don't do it quickly. They don't do it, but they do it steadily, because we're not talking about how productive you are. We're talking about how well can you stay moving in a particular direction. Yeah. When we're talking about the hindrance, we're talking about, do you get derailed? And even somebody who has a lot lower energy, if they're able to not get derailed, will continue moving towards their goal, even if they're doing it slow. And there's been some great examples throughout history of Buddhist practitioners who most people kind of looked at as like lazy, yeah, but they were considered highly attained. Yeah, I can think of one meditator who, when they sit down on their meditation cushion, they're just, their body is just like all over the place, and just wobbly, and everybody who sees them assumes that they're falling asleep. But and this is a very esteemed, like high-ranking monastic, and when other people ask, like, why do you just let that person fall asleep on their meditation cushion, they're like, who am I to admonish that venerable? Like, do you have any idea how bright their mind is? Yeah. They look sleepy. They look like they're nodding off, but that's just their body. That's because they're not even paying attention to their body. Yeah. They do have a lower energy state, but a very bright mind. Uh, okay. So before we move to the meditation, I wanted to see if we could flesh this out just a little bit more. I thought we'd make like a mental image, yeah. And so many of us, it's been a while since we've been in school, but maybe just like when you're dreaming, how you can find yourself instantly transported back there and have all of the neuroses coming up that you had when you were in high school. Let's just verisimilitude, just suspension of disbelief, and you're back in school. Yeah. And so it's a few minutes before class, you're waiting for the teacher, you're talking with your friends, you're chatting about what you're going to do after class. And then the bell rings and the teacher comes in, and they start to write some stuff up on the board, and they tell you to get out your books. And you were talking with your friends, but suddenly okay, can't talk with my friends. And so you look at what the teacher, and the teacher's writing some stuff, and you realize you kind of already know what the teacher is talking about. And so you're like, okay, yeah, no, I already get that. I already get that. So you don't feel like you really need to pay much attention. You're not, you're kind of zoning off, like, when are they going to get to something that's relevant to me? And eventually they get to something that doesn't make any sense at all. And you realize that maybe their notes got mixed up and they're talking about something you haven't studied yet. So you're trying to understand it, but you also don't really get it. And now it's just a double whammy, you know, it's from stuff you know to stuff you can't possibly know. And the teacher's droning on and on. And you look at the clock and you see it's only been 5 minutes. And you're like, okay, well, I'll practice mindfulness of the body to help bring me into the present moment. Yeah. And so you start to concentrate all your mindfulness on your breath, breathing in, breathing out, and the teacher's just droning. It seems like time is slowing down, like a second is becoming 10 seconds, 10 seconds is becoming a minute is becoming 10 minutes. And 10 minutes seems like it could be hours. And before you know it, you look back up at the clock, you've only been meditating on your breath for 45 seconds. Yeah. And it seems to be getting worse. It seems like the world is shrinking and you're looking for any kind of escape route, but all you see are the walls of the classroom all around you. All you see is the teacher, like a warden up front, ready to catch any motion you might make for the door. You think, can I go to the bathroom? No, it's only 5 minutes into the class. They're not going to let you take a hall pass. What can you do? What can you do? Yeah. Now you look up, it's only been another 30 seconds. And suddenly you're doing the math, you're figuring out when the class ends, and it seems like that's forever into the future. Yeah. This was my life for like 15 years. This was every day of my life. Yeah. But now you've probably some of that rung true, right? Some of that sounded familiar, I hope. It wasn't just me, right? Well, now we're going to look at that through the lens of the hindrances, right? Let's say that instead of focusing on the drowsiness, instead of focusing on the boredom, we focus on the moment-to-moment mind states that might have led us into that boredom. Yeah. What did they look like? What did they sound like? What was the voice they used? What did they focus on? Yeah. Now, having our similes, like the water covered over or the prison, can maybe guide us. What are we looking for? Well, we're looking for something that robs us of agency, that obscures our vision, that is not flavorful, something that is dry, dull, not an object of beauty or interest. Yeah. Something that seems irrelevant. Well, talking with our friends was interesting. The teacher comes in, we can no longer do the thing that's interesting. We lose some agency, right? And this hits us, whether or not we realize it. We stop doing the thing that was interesting to us, and suddenly we're stuck doing something that somebody else expects us to do. And then the teacher starts writing up on the board, and we realize we already know it. So rather than pulling at our interest and, oh, this is something I can learn, we realize we already have that. It's irrelevant to us. It's unnecessary. Again, another mind state of, oh, this isn't for me. This isn't something I have to participate in. I don't need to arouse any energy to be involved in this. Then the teacher starts talking about something that we don't get. And again, we get this mind state of, well, I can't know that. Yeah, we haven't studied that yet. Don't they realize? Don't they see? Don't they see how all of the students are squirming? And I don't know, Robert, maybe you can confirm that, yeah, teachers notice, yeah, that the students are squirming. They notice that the students are zoning out, but they don't have a choice. They've got to cover the lesson, and they're trying to get as many across to the far shore as they can, but they realize some are going to drown, and that's they have to accept that to be a teacher, right? So they keep going, and again, our agency is diminished, is cut off. Yeah, we're like, I can't know this. And if we let that stop us from applying our mind, then we're not applying our mind to the material anymore, because we think there's no way that we could get it. We don't have necessary information, right? And then we start thinking like, what can I do? Yeah. Instead of thinking like, what am I doing? We start to think, what can I do? We're trying to get away. We're trying to escape. But what do we see when we have that mind state? The walls. Yeah. We don't see the bright open field like when we're going out to play soccer. We don't see the dance floor like we're in at a concert and we just want to jump onto the dance floor and dance with our friends. Yeah, we don't see a movie screen that's flashing images of a bright and interesting story to draw us in. All we see is dumb, dull walls, like the algae on top of the water, yeah, blocking our vision, closing us in. And it feels like we're getting closed in on, right? Feels like the world is getting smaller. All of this conditioned by momentary mind states. What are we attending to? And what effect does that have on the mind? Now, we might pat ourselves on the back when we have the idea to practice mindfulness. And I think this is the trap that we all fall into, yeah? When we're experiencing sloth and torpor on the meditation cushion, we're like, I can get out of this. I'm trained. I'm a meditator. I will practice mindfulness. I will focus on the breath. But look at the mind state. We're not focusing on the breath because we want to. We're not focusing on the breath because we're interested in the breath. We're not focusing on the breath because we're feeling energetic and moving towards our goal of mindfulness. We're doing it because we're trying to get away. We're trying to escape the teacher and their boring lecture. Yeah. The problem is the teacher in that scenario is still in control. We are the prisoner, they are the warden, right? We have given them the keys to our cell, basically, by saying they get to dictate that we have to meditate now to, as a sort of anesthetic, to protect our mind from the boring influence of their teaching. But again, this is just a trap. It's a mind state that conditions a lack of agency. Yeah. What was the right escape route? Well, it's hard to say in any given scenario, but we can't force ourselves to do something to generate interest, right? We have to generate interest to remember and get in touch with our agency, get in touch with what is our goal, what are we moving towards, what are we focusing on, yeah? But to try to hide in meditation is only going to condition lower energy, more drawn in states of mind. Yeah? So what happens, it seems like time slows down, yeah? And the funny thing about time is when we're looking into the eyes of our lover, when we are playing a fascinating video game that we just bought, when we are listening to music late into the night, we don't pay attention to the time. When we have something that we're really fully invested and interested in, time doesn't matter. We tend to think about time when we're trying to get out. We tend to think about time when it's not moving fast enough. Yeah. And so that momentary attention to the clock and trying to be like, well, when do I get to do what I want to do? This is again a conditioning thought, an example of Tahn Pamutto, of Sloth and Torpor. It doesn't feel sleepy. It doesn't feel drowsy, right? We wouldn't know to associate that with this continuing slowing of time and closing in of the mind unless we train ourselves to think in terms of cause and effect. We look at the clock, we look how slow it's moving, and we focus on that for a minute, and it reinforces this idea that we are getting more drawn in and we are getting more cut off. Our freedom is 45 minutes in the future. and 45 minutes is getting longer. It's stretching into eternity. Yeah. And all of these momentary acts of attention are building for us our prison, our wall, our swamp that we are now going to occupy for the next 45 eternities. Yeah. Until we get out, and think of that moment when the bell rings. The moment before, abject agony, no agency, zero energy. You could not do something to save your life. And then the bell rings. The energy comes back. You're so excited. You laugh with your friends. You make faces at how boring that was. You fly up. Blood starts to flow into all of your cells. You grab your books. You have never been more excited to get to the next class as you are in that moment. So what's the takeaway? That sloth and torpor, that sense of dullness and drowsiness, was an illusion. That prison was a mental prison created by your mind and your mental states. It wasn't a reality. The second you had something better to do, the second you regained your agency, you're gone. You're out that door so fast, right? The sloth and torpor was not real. And this is what we have to remind ourselves when we're doing something that gives us agency, that gives us entertainment, that gives us interest, that gives us pleasure. We don't experience any limiting of the mind. Yeah. And so in order to combat sloth and torpor, we've got to catch those mind states. And furthermore, we'll get a bit more into that in the afternoon. But this morning, if you're interested, watch. First, we've got to catch those mind states, and we have to know them as they are. We have to, I see you, Mara. Every time the mind tells us, oh, oh, another hour until lunch. Oh, this is so boring. When will this be over? Oh, my leg hurts. I gotta get up, but I can't get up. Everybody will see me get up. I gotta wait. Yeah. What are the mind states that have us sacrificing our agency? Yeah. We catch them and don't believe them. We say you're a liar. Say this is an illusion. Say this is not real. Like clear the dust and the algae off of the top of the water and say this is not the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is you only lose agency when you surrender it in that way. Yeah. Don't do mindfulness as a way to escape the boredom of not having anything to do. Rather, reconnect with what is it. Ask yourself, what is it I do want to do? And maybe some of us have experienced that that's the hardest thing of all, is to figure out what we want to do. But sometimes that's a different hindrance that we're not going to get into much today, the hindrance of doubt. Instead, come up with anything that you could legitimately say that you want to do, even if it's feel, oh well, so if I was cooking something, then I would be yeah, I'm interested. Oh, I want to cook something for lunch. Well, run through the list of things. Yeah. Oh, I could get this, I could get this, I could get this, and I put it together. What's the procedure for doing that? Well, I get this, and then I do this, and I do this, and do this. And just ask yourself with that quick little mental activity, have you regained some agency by thinking of the things that you can do, by thinking of the things that you're capable of doing, by thinking of the things that you do know and you're well versed in? It's fascinating, isn't it, how quickly you can turn around that mind state from I can't do anything, or this is so boring, or this is so dull, to oh, I can't wait. Oh, this is great. And you feel the energy almost like surging back into you because of that turning of the mind. Yeah? And so see if we can catch that, see if we can make this reversal. But even if we don't, it's ammunition. Yeah. We'll start to learn, and we'll start to gather our defenses against Mara. Yeah. Maybe sometimes sloth and torpor is going to win, when we apply ourselves to it. But what we see from again, that reservoir, that stockpile of delusion that we might carry with us, the low energy states or the high energy states that seem to dictate our pervasive mood throughout the day, the week, the year. We know that this is not a battle. This is a war. Yeah, there will be little battles against sloth and torpor, but the result of thinking about it, of trying to catch it, of getting more wise to the things that our mind tells us to get us to give up our agency, we'll have benefits over the long term. It will diminish that ignorance. It will diminish the delusion. Yeah, that keeps us not working towards our goals. So I can say this from experience that while I am a kind of lower energy state person, who's like the Zen monk Ryokan, whose teacher gave him, in one hand he gave him the, what is it, the enka or whatever that says you're hereby, I hereby certify that you are enlightened. And in the other hand, he gave him the name Ryokan and told him to go sleep on a brick wall somewhere. Because he's like, you're enlightened, but you're also lazy. In the same way, you can be who you are. Yeah, we're not speaking ill of people who don't build great things or get doctorates or cure cancer. You can be who you are, and if you can work towards a goal, if you can find interest in the little things, if you can get through a day without being bored out of your mind, well, then you have accomplished something great. Yeah, you've gotten a sense of agency and a sense of say discipline over your mind that is hard won and truly worthwhile. Yeah, or the Buddha wouldn't talk about it so much. So let's yeah, with that, let's we can take a sort of 10-minute break, get up, situate things, stretch your limbs, sigh, and say, finally, stop talking. Yeah. And then we'll come back. We'll sit, we'll walk for 2 hours. Yeah. And then, and if you're around at 11, we'll sign off. We'll do our lunch break. And those who have asked for a one-on-one interview, I will get that to you in just a minute. So don't head out before you get your time.